You slapped me in front of everyone, Kendra. Timothy's voice trembled not from anger but heartbreak. Nobody at the Maryland production office expected what came next, the CEO who everyone feared would fall to her knees begging the man she once humiliated. Before we begin, please like, subscribe and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. United States, Canada, Malaysia, UK, Australia, Jamaica. Daddy, you forgot my lunchbox again. Isha's little voice echoed down the narrow hallway of their small two-bedroom apartment in Laurel, Maryland. The place smelled faintly of cinnamon cereal and morning rush. Timothy Wallen, 36, exhaled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he tied her hair into two tiny puffs. He wasn't a perfect father, but he tried like hell to be a good one. The clock on the microwave blinked 7:42 a.m. He was already 10 minutes behind schedule. The battered Honda Civic outside coughed like it had the flu, and the half-empty gas tank was an argument waiting to happen with his wallet. But when Isha smiled, gap-toothed, bright-eyed, it made the weight of single fatherhood a little lighter. Eat your apple slices, okay? No trading them for cookies this time, Timothy said, giving her a look. Fine, she mumbled, zipping her pink backpack. Can we watch that movie tonight, the one with the singing crab? If Daddy doesn't pass out first, he laughed. Now go, your bus is coming. She dashed off, leaving her father standing in the doorway, waving until the yellow bus disappeared down the street. For a brief second, the world was quiet. Then the exhaustion hit. By 8:30 a.m., Timothy was in the elevator of Harborline Productions, a mid-size advertising company tucked between Baltimore and D.C. He worked as a graphic designer, meaning he spent most of his day blending colors, resizing logos, and dodging the wrath of one woman, Kendra Scott. The CEO. 53, divorced, rich, sharp as a blade and twice as cold. Rumor had it she once made a senior manager cry during a Zoom call just because he used the word okay instead of yes, ma'am. She ran the company like a warship. Nobody breathed unless she approved the air quality first. Timothy, he stayed in her good books by keeping his head down and his mouth shut. That morning she walked into the open office floor, heels clicking like gunshots. Good morning, team, she said flatly, though no one dared respond. Her coffee cup had Queen of Efficiency printed on it, an inside joke no one laughed at. Timothy pretended to adjust a poster layout on his monitor. Kendra's shadow loomed behind him. Wallen, she said, voice crisp. Those client drafts, are they ready? He turned, forcing a polite smile. I'm finalizing the third one now, you'll have them before noon. Before noon means 11, not 12. Time management, Mr. Wallen. Yes, ma'am. Her heels clicked away, the office exhaled. Underneath that arrogance, though, Timothy sensed something else, something hollow. The way she'd pause before entering her office, staring at her reflection in the glass door like she was arguing with herself. Sometimes he wondered if she went home to an empty house. Hours later, during lunch, his coworker Darius nudged him. Bro, how you handle that woman every day, she makes the devil look polite. Timothy chuckled, I just remind myself she signs the checks. But inside, he knew it wasn't that simple. There was something about Kendra Scott that intrigued him. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in that quiet human curiosity kind of way. She looked like a woman who hadn't laughed in years. When the clock struck 5, most of the office cleared out. Timothy stayed behind, tweaking one last presentation slide. His daughter was at a 3-day school excursion, first time she'd been away that long, so there was no rush home. He noticed Kendra's office light still on. Through the glass, she sat stiffly at her desk, staring at nothing. Her hands didn't move for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, she turned off the light and left without saying a word. The next morning, she didn't show up. That never happened, not in 6 years of working there. Kendra was the type to send emails from the if she were dying. Timothy needed a few signed files from her for a client project. He called her office phone, no answer. Her cell went straight to voicemail. He hesitated, but something inside him said go check on her. Her townhouse wasn't far, 15 minutes away, a sleek brick corner home in an upscale neighborhood in Columbia. The kind of place where lawns were trimmed with laser precision. When he rang the doorbell, silence answered first, then the faint sound of crying. "Miss Scott," he called gently. The door creaked open. Kendra stood there, eyes red and puffy, wearing an oversized sweatshirt instead of her usual power suit. The sight almost didn't register, it felt wrong, like seeing a statue weep. "Wallen," she whispered, "why are you here? You didn't come to work and you weren't answering your phone. I was worried." For a moment she just stared at him, then, unexpectedly, she broke. Her voice cracked. I can't keep pretending anymore. Everyone thinks I'm so strong, so put together, but I'm tired, Tim, so damn tired." The woman who terrified executives now sobbed into her hands. He hesitated, then stepped forward, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, it's okay, you don't have to pretend right now." She didn't push him away. Instead, she leaned into him just enough for him to feel how fragile she really was. Outside, the Maryland sky dimmed, clouds rolling in like witnesses. Inside that quiet townhouse, the walls that separated boss and employee began to tremble, if only a little. Timothy didn't know it yet, but this was the night everything in both their lives would start to unravel. "I poured my heart into this story because I believe real emotions still matter. My girlfriend laughed and said I'd never even reach 2,000 subscribers. She might be right, unless someone like you proves her wrong. Please hit subscribe, not for me alone but for the stories that deserve to be heard." The rain started not long after Timothy stepped inside. It wasn't a heavy storm, just a slow, stubborn drizzle that painted gray streaks across the wide windows of Kendra Scott's living room. The house was elegant, too elegant. Everything looked expensive but untouched, like it belonged in a real estate brochure, not in the life of a woman who actually lived there. He could hear the faint hum of a classical piano piece from a nearby speaker. Something sad, something that didn't know how to stop playing even when the listener had stopped caring. Kendra sat on the edge of the sofa, her elbows resting on her knees, hands covering her face. "Do you ever feel like the world doesn't need you anymore?" she asked quietly, not even looking up. Timothy hesitated before sitting in the armchair across from her. "I think I've felt invisible before," he admitted. "Like no matter how hard I try, I'm just another name on an email chain." Kendra gave a small, bitter laugh. "At least people still email you. Half the time they don't even bother with me unless they need something signed." She wiped at her eyes, smearing her mascara. "My daughter barely calls. My ex-husband remarried someone half my age. My parents stopped visiting after the divorce, and yet everyone still calls me strong." The word strong cracked something inside her. Timothy didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way people do when they realize silence is the only thing that can hold someone's pain. "I built that company from scratch," she said, her voice shaking. "Every project, every contract, every late night, me, and for what? So people could fear me instead of respect me." She looked at him suddenly, as if remembering he was still there. "You think I'm arrogant, don't you?" He blinked, startled. "No ma'am, I think you're guarded." Her eyes softened at that. Guarded, that's a kind word for impossible. She leaned back, exhaling long and shaky. The faint smell of her perfume, white jasmine and something woodsy, filled the air between them. Timothy felt the heaviness of the moment pressing against his chest. He had seen powerful people before, but never one so desperate to be seen as human. "Can I get you some water?" he asked finally. She nodded and he made his way into the kitchen. It was spotless, no dirty dishes, no signs of recent meals, just sterile silence. He found a glass, filled it, and returned to her side. When she took it, her fingers brushed his. The touch lingered for half a second too long. "Thank you," she murmured, "you didn't have to come." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but no one deserves to cry alone." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Kendra's eyes glistened again, but this time the tears didn't fall. She simply looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing someone she'd passed 100 times without noticing. "You're a good man, Timothy Wallen," she whispered. He shrugged, trying to hide the warmth crawling up his neck, just trying to do right by people. "You remind me of my ex-husband before success made him selfish," she said, staring into her glass. "He used to bring me coffee in bed every morning. Then one day he started bringing excuses instead." Silence filled the space between them again, thick and oddly intimate. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Timothy could feel the pull of the moment, the quiet kind that sneaks up on you before you even realize something's changed. Kendra stood up suddenly and walked toward the window. Her reflection in the glass looked small, almost frightened. "I don't even know who I am when I'm not Kendra Scott, CEO," she said. "Maybe that's the punishment for being too proud, you forget how to be a person." He joined her at the window, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Maybe being a person's easier when someone else reminds you you're one," he said. Her lip trembled just a little. She turned to face him, and in her eyes there wasn't arrogance or power, just loneliness. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. It wasn't romantic at first, just human, a quiet, wordless thank you for being there. But something shifted in that touch, something neither of them could name yet. Minutes passed, the rain outside softened again. Kendra sank back into the couch, pulling a throw blanket around her shoulders. Her voice came out small. "Would you stay for a bit? I don't want to be alone tonight." Timothy hesitated, his mind raced to Isha, thankfully still away on her school trip. He nodded. "Yeah, I can stay a while." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They sat there in the dim light, sipping coffee, trading small talk that grew strangely comfortable. He told her about Isha, how she loved drawing, how she'd started leaving little doodles on his desk at work. Kendra laughed softly. "Sounds like she's got your talent." "She's got more patience than me, that's for sure," he said, grinning. For the first time, Kendra's laughter sounded genuine. It filled the empty room like sunlight sneaking through blinds. And for the first time, Timothy noticed how beautiful she looked when she wasn't wearing that hard mask of control. As the night stretched on, the distance between them disappeared, inch by inch, word by word. She told him stories about the early days of the company, how she used to sleep in the office, fueled by instant coffee and ambition. He told her how he'd lost his wife to illness when Isha was just a baby, how every day since had been a mix of gratitude and grief. They found common ground in their brokenness. At some point, she reached over and touched his arm, her eyes searching his. "I don't know why," she whispered, "but when you're here I don't feel so heavy." Timothy's pulse stumbled. "Maybe you just needed someone to listen." She nodded slowly. "Or maybe I needed someone who doesn't need anything from me." That sentence pierced him deeper than it should have. The air changed, subtle, electric, a look passed between them that said everything words couldn't. And before either of them could overthink it, she leaned forward. Her lips brushed his, soft and trembling. The rain outside stopped completely. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was charged, complicated, and undeniably human. Kendra whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe loneliness is just pride wearing a fancy dress." Timothy didn't answer, he couldn't. His thoughts were spinning somewhere between guilt and desire. Later that night, when he finally left her house, the streets were still wet from the rain. He sat in his car for a long time before driving off, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Something had changed, not just for her, for both of them. He didn't know where it was leading, but he knew one thing for sure. Nothing about his life or hers would ever be the same again. Morning light crept through the blinds, soft and golden, landing across Kendra's living room like it was nervous to wake anyone. Timothy sat there for a moment, watching the quiet. Her house didn't feel so empty anymore, but maybe that was just because it still carried the echo of last night. Kendra stirred, half asleep on the couch, blanket tangled around her legs. She looked peaceful, almost unrecognizable from the woman who ruled over the office like a queen with no court. For a second, Timothy let himself just look. The human side of her, the one no one got to see, was so fragile it hurt. When she opened her eyes, their gazes met. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, standing quickly like he'd been caught doing something wrong. I should probably go." "Right," she murmured, pulling the blanket tighter. "Thank you for last night." He nodded, unsure what thank you even meant in this context. By the time he left, the morning sun was bright enough to burn away the guilt, at least for a while. The drive back to Laurel felt longer than usual. Every song on the radio sounded like it was written for people who had made better choices. When he got home, Isha's drawings still covered the fridge. Stick figures, stars, a messy heart labeled me plus daddy. He stared at it for a long time. That tiny heart reminded him who he was supposed to be: steady, dependable, grounded, not the kind of man who lost himself in a moment of weakness. The next few days at work were awkward in ways only two people with a shared secret could understand. Kendra's office door stayed closed most of the time, and when she did come out, her tone was softer, her eyes lingered longer, and her heels clicked a little slower. Nobody noticed, but Timothy felt it every single second. He'd catch her watching him from her glass office window, pretending to check an email. And sometimes, when he passed by her door, she'd say quietly, "Wallen, can we talk for a minute?" Those conversations weren't about work anymore. They were about late-night thoughts, old regrets, music, dreams, and everything else they had never told anyone. But the line between understanding and attachment got blurry fast. One night she called him just to say she couldn't sleep. He told her to make chamomile tea. Then another night she called again, just to hear his voice. He didn't realize until later that he started keeping his phone beside his pillow, waiting for her calls. At work, whispers began to circulate. Coworkers exchanged glances, quiet laughter in corners. Timothy tried to ignore it, but gossip spreads faster than truth in any office. "Hey man," Darius said one afternoon, smirking, "the boss seems real friendly with you lately. You pull in overtime or something else?" Timothy forced a chuckle. "Shut up, D." But deep down his stomach twisted. Meanwhile, Kendra was changing in ways that even she didn't understand. She smiled more in meetings, praised people instead of criticizing, and once even brought donuts for the whole team. Everyone thought she'd taken some kind of management course. Only Timothy knew she just remembered what kindness felt like. One afternoon, she invited him to lunch, some quiet cafe tucked off Main Street in Ellicott City. They sat by the window, sunlight falling over their table, the smell of roasted coffee floating in the air. "This place reminds me of who I used to be," she said, "before ambition swallowed me whole." He looked at her. "You're still that person, Kendra, you just forgot where you buried her." Her smile trembled. "You always say the right things." "Maybe it's because no one else says them to you," he replied. There was something dangerous about the way they started looking at each other. Something too gentle for friendship, too heavy for comfort. When their hands brushed across the table, it wasn't an accident. For a heartbeat, the whole cafe went quiet. And when she pulled her hand back, her face said everything her mouth couldn't. "This is wrong, but I don't want it to stop." Back at work, the tension thickened. Every email between them carried hidden meaning. Every glance felt like it held a memory only they could see. And yet, every time Timothy saw Isha's drawings on his desk, guilt sat heavy in his chest. He'd remind himself, "She's your boss, she's older, she's your mistake waiting to happen." But his heart refused to listen. Then came the night that made everything worse. Kendra had stayed late in her office. Timothy was wrapping up a client design in the next room. Around 8 p.m., she appeared in his doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Peace offering," she said, "you've been working all day." He smiled faintly. "You too." She stepped closer, too close. "I don't know what we're doing," she whispered. "Neither do I," he said. And then she kissed him. No pretense, no hesitation, just quiet surrender. The world outside went silent again, just like that first night. They didn't talk much afterward. There wasn't anything left to explain. But when she laid her head on his chest, she said softly, "You make me feel young again." He didn't answer, because for the first time he didn't feel proud of it. He just felt lost. The next morning, reality showed up wearing a name badge and carrying consequences. At the office, he couldn't look her in the eye, and she, despite trying, couldn't pretend nothing happened. The line between them wasn't just blurred anymore, it was gone. Weeks passed like that, quiet, tense, full of half-smiles and what-ifs. Kendra tried to maintain her authority. Timothy tried to hold on to his dignity. But love built on secrets never stays quiet forever. One Friday evening, as he packed his things, she stood by his desk and said, "You've changed me, Tim." He looked up, tired but kind. "I hope for the better." Her eyes softened. "Definitely for the better." As she walked away, he watched her go, knowing something deep inside him, his balance, his simplicity was slipping away one day at a time. He wanted to stop it, he didn't. And maybe that was the real tragedy. You know, sometimes life doesn't destroy us in one blow. Sometimes it just blurs the lines, one moment of comfort, one soft kiss, one secret at a time, until we can't tell right from wrong anymore. And if you've ever felt that too, that quiet pull between heart and reason, don't just disappear after this story. Subscribe to this channel, stay here with me. Because stories like this aren't fiction, they're mirrors. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find a piece of your own truth in the next one. The morning sun cut through the blinds like it was trying to expose something. At Harbor Productions, the air was heavy, electric, the kind that clung to people's skin when something was about to go wrong. Timothy walked in just before 9, coffee in hand, heart heavier than the backpack he carried for Isha when she was little. He hadn't slept much. The memories of Kendra's touch, her whispers, her quiet laughter in those late-night calls, they looped in his mind like a song that wouldn't stop playing. At first, no one noticed him slip to his desk. He looked normal, calm, focused. But inside, his chest was a storm, guilt, longing, exhaustion, all fighting for space. When Kendra arrived that morning, you could hear her heels before you saw her. Sharp, confident, perfectly on rhythm. Like nothing had ever happened. "Morning, everyone," she said, voice clear and composed. The same woman who'd once cried in his arms now looked like she owned the sun. Timothy forced himself not to look up. He kept working, eyes glued to his monitor, fingers pretending to be busy. But when her perfume drifted past his desk, a soft mix of jasmine and power, his focus shattered. By lunch, the tension had turned into whispers. People could feel the change between them. They didn't know what it was, but the air around the two carried something charged, unspoken, dangerous. That afternoon, Kendra sent an email. "Timothy, I need the revised design package on my desk by 4 p.m. sharp." He glanced at the clock, 2:30. He was knee-deep in another client's project, one that had been promised since last week. He replied quickly, "I'll get it to you after I finalize the current project, shouldn't be long." He hit send without thinking. At 3:45 her door opened. "Kendra's coming," Darius whispered, "brace yourself." Timothy didn't look up, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. She walked straight to his desk, heels stabbing the floor with each step. "Where the design package?" she asked, tone sharp enough to draw blood. Timothy swallowed hard. "I was finishing up the Johnson file first, figured it'd be better to get that cleared before." "You figured?" Her eyes flashed. "Do I pay you to figure or to follow instructions?" A few heads popped up from behind monitors. The office had gone silent. Timothy stood slowly, trying to keep his composure. "Kendra, I said I'd have it done, I just needed another hour." Her voice rose, cold and cutting. "You don't tell me when work gets done, I tell you." He blinked. "Kendra, please don't do this here." Her anger burned too hot to stop. "Oh, I'll do it wherever I damn well please," she snapped. "You think you can slack off because we—" She caught herself, but it was too late. The whole office froze. Everyone understood that tiny pause. "That we—" Timothy's jaw tightened. "Finish that sentence," he said quietly. Kendra's face twitched between fury and fear. And then, before anyone could react, she slapped him. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. For a second, no one breathed. Timothy didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, palms stinging, dignity burning. The humiliation was instant and complete. He didn't yell. He didn't defend himself. He just looked her dead in the eyes, the woman he'd comforted, held, loved, and said calmly, but with a tremor that broke the silence, "You just lost something you can't buy back." Then he turned and walked out. No one dared move. Kendra stood there, hands shaking, eyes wide as if realizing what she'd just done. Her mouth opened to speak, but no words came out. Timothy didn't stop until he reached his car. He sat there gripping the steering wheel, chest tight. The anger didn't come first, it was the shame. The deep, personal shame of giving your heart to someone who saw you as disposable. He laughed once bitterly, "Guess I'm the fool this time." That night after Isha was asleep, he opened his laptop. Typed a few words, deleted them, typed again. "Dear HR. Effective immediately, I am resigning from Harborline Productions. Please consider this my formal notice. He hesitated before adding one more line. Tell Kendra Scott I wish her peace. He clicked send. And with that, 6 years of work, every overtime hour, every deadline met, every bit of pride swallowed was over. The next morning, Kendra stormed into the office, expecting him to be there. He was. When she checked her inbox, the resignation email glared back like a mirror she didn't want to look into. Her throat tightened as she read it, twice. By noon, the office knew the Queen had lost her favorite night. For the rest of the day, she couldn't think, couldn't work. Her coffee went cold on her desk, her phone buzzed unanswered. She replayed the slap again and again in her mind, the way everyone looked at her, the silence that followed, the disappointment in his eyes. It wasn't just guilt eating her alive, it was regret. Around 7 p.m., she drove to his apartment in Laurel. She'd never been there before. She knocked once, no answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. Through the window, she saw the living room stripped bare. He was gone. On the kitchen counter, under the soft hum of the streetlight, she spotted an envelope taped to the door. Her name written neatly in blue ink. She opened it with trembling fingers. Kendra. I didn't leave because of the slap. I left because it reminded me that I was never safe with you, not emotionally, not professionally, not as a man trying to hold onto his self-respect. You taught me something important. Love doesn't need power to be real, it needs peace, and you never learned how to give that. Goodbye. She folded the letter, her tears blurring the ink. For once, her house, her money, her title, none of it mattered. She had everything, yet she'd managed to lose the only person who ever saw her as more than her nameplate. When she drove home that night, the rain began again, soft, steady, relentless. The same kind that fell the first night he walked into her house. Only this time it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like punishment. At a red light, she whispered to herself, voice trembling, "What have I done?" The answer was simple. She destroyed the only good thing that had ever dared to love her past her pride. And as the Maryland rain washed against her windshield, Kendra Scott realized something too late. Some mistakes don't come with second chances. Some just echo. Forever. It had been 8 months since Timothy Wallen left Maryland. 8 months since the slap, the silence, and the letter that ended it all. The snow had just started falling in Richmond, Virginia, where he'd moved with Isha to start fresh. Their new apartment wasn't fancy, 2 bedrooms, brick walls, and a small balcony that overlooked a park, but it was peaceful. And peace, for the first time in a long while, felt like wealth. In the mornings, he'd pack Isha's lunch while she hummed songs from school. They'd eat cereal together, talk about her art projects, and laugh about the time she convinced her teacher that her dad was a famous designer from Baltimore. He wasn't famous, but in her eyes he was enough. After dropping her at school, he'd head to his new job, a small design firm run by a man named Mr. Landon. No drama, no tension, no walking on eggshells. Just work, creativity, and calm. Sometimes he missed the fast pace of Harborline Productions, the big projects, the big city energy. But then he'd remember the cost of that life, and suddenly he didn't miss it at all. Still, there were nights when he couldn't sleep. Nights when his mind replayed that day, her eyes full of fire and regret, the sound of her hand, the silence that followed. He'd close his eyes and wonder if she ever thought about him, about what they could have been if pride hadn't gotten in the way. Meanwhile, back in Maryland, the production company wasn't the same. Kendra Scott was still CEO, still wealthy, still powerful, but her presence had changed. The arrogance was gone, the spark too. Her office door stayed closed most days, not because she was busy, but because she couldn't face the reflection in her own glass walls. The company ran fine without him. But she didn't. Her mornings were quieter, her evenings lonelier. She'd come home to that same immaculate house and sit on the couch staring at nothing, the TV flickering without sound. Sometimes she'd scroll through her phone, stopping at the photos from company events, ones where Timothy's smile glowed in the background, his daughter's drawing pinned to his cubicle wall. She'd zoom in on that little paper heart Isha had made. And for reasons she couldn't explain, it broke her more than anything. One night her daughter Alyssa called from college. "Mom, are you okay? You sound off." Kendra laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, baby, just tired." Alyssa hesitated. "You know you don't have to be strong all the time." The words hit like truth from someone too young to understand its weight. For a moment, Kendra almost confessed everything: the affair, the slap, the loneliness, but pride still had its claws. She just said, "I know, sweetheart, I'm working on it." After the call, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the lights of Columbia shimmer in the distance. The city was alive, but she felt invisible. It was the same house, same life, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. Meanwhile, in Richmond, Timothy found small joys. He coached Isha's art club, taught her how to ride her bike, and took her for pizza every Friday. One night as they walked home, she said, "Daddy, you smile more now." He laughed. "Do I?" "Uh-huh," she said confidently. "It's like your face forgot it used to be sad." That simple statement stuck with him all night. Children have a way of telling the truth without realizing they're holding a knife of honesty. A few weeks later, he got a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it until he heard her voice. "Tim." His chest tightened. "Kendra." Silence lingered, heavy, fragile. "I shouldn't have called," she said quickly. "I just needed to say I'm sorry for everything for you." Timothy leaned against the wall, eyes closed. "It's okay." "It's not," she whispered. "You didn't deserve any of it." For a moment neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "You taught me something too. You showed me what happens when pride gets louder than love." Kendra swallowed hard. "Are you happy?" He looked toward the living room, where Isha sat cross-legged on the floor coloring. "Yeah," he said softly, "I am." She let out a trembling breath. "Good, you deserve that." And then, before he could respond, she hung up. He stood there for a long time, staring at his phone, the quiet hum of the heater filling the silence she left behind. That night, she deleted his number. And he didn't call back. Some stories end not with anger but with acceptance. Weeks turned into months again. Spring came early that year, flowers blooming too soon, like the world was rushing to start over. Kendra began seeing a therapist. She stopped checking her email after hours, stopped measuring her worth by titles and deadlines. She even smiled once at her reflection. It looked strange but real. Timothy started freelancing more, designing logos for small businesses, teaching Isha how to draw perspective lines. One afternoon, while watching her shade a sunset with her crayons, he realized something profound. He'd spent years chasing stability, but peace had always been about choosing what didn't hurt. And for the first time, he'd chosen right. On a random Tuesday, Kendra took a drive through Baltimore. She passed the old office, the park they once walked past together, the coffee shop where he'd made her laugh for the first time. Every memory felt like a ghost, soft, sad, and painfully human. She parked by the harbor, stepped out, and let the wind hit her face. For once, she didn't run from it. As the sun dipped behind the water, she whispered, "You were right, Tim. Love doesn't need power, it needs peace." And for the first time in years, she cried, not from loss but from understanding. That night, as the city lights shimmered against the bay, Kendra Scott, once the woman who thought she had everything, finally learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. And miles away, in a small Richmond apartment, Timothy Wallen tucked his daughter into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the storm that had finally passed. Because sometimes peace doesn't arrive wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it comes after the wreckage, when you've burned through pride, pain, and mistakes, and what's left is just the truth. You know, stories like theirs aren't just about love. They're about the parts of us we try to hide, the pride we defend, the hearts we hurt, the lessons we almost learned too late. If you've ever lost something because of your own pride, if you've ever looked back and thought maybe I could have done better, don't just leave. Subscribe to this channel, stay, and let's keep sharing stories that remind us what it really costs to be human, because sometimes the most powerful apologies are the ones we whisper to ourselves.